The applause was thunderous. Crystal chandeliers glimmered overhead, casting soft golden light across the ballroom. I stood near the back of the room, heart pounding, hands cold, watching as my sister ascended the stage in a sleek black gown that shimmered with every camera flash. For revolutionary innovation in sustainable architecture, this year's Rising Visionary Award goes to Eliza Hartley. The crowd erupted. I couldn't move. She took the microphone with practiced grace, smiled at the audience like she belonged there, and began to speak. This project has been a labor of love. Years of ideation, experimentation, and a deep connection to community-focused design. My project. My name wasn't mentioned, not once. It had started as a simple idea. A hybrid housing structure that merged green infrastructure with low-income accessibility. I'd spent 6 years researching materials, prototyping with limited funding, refining blueprints down to the millimeter. I hadn't even submitted the project for awards. Not because I didn't believe in it, but because I wasn't ready. I wanted it perfect. But Eliza had always been bold, or reckless, or opportunistic. Maybe all three. I watched her smile, soaking in the limelight, my limelight. And I realized something chilling. She hadn't just taken credit. She'd taken my life's work and wrapped it around herself like it had always belonged to her. Someone beside me whispered, "She's brilliant. That idea, it's going to change everything." I turned away, swallowing the taste of betrayal. My phone buzzed, a message from my former mentor, Lila Monroe. "Is this your project? Call me." I slipped out the back of the ballroom, the applause still echoing behind me, and stepped into the cold night air. My breath hit the chill like smoke, and I stood there motionless, trying to keep my hands from trembling. Eliza hadn't just stolen my work, she'd stolen my future. But she didn't know one thing: I had a plan, and I wasn't going to let her keep what was never hers to take. Not without a fight. 3 days before the gala, she had come over with a bottle of wine and that soft, sugary voice she used when she wanted something. "I just want to see what you've been working on," Eliza had said, peering into the studio space I'd carved out in the back of my tiny apartment. "You never let me in anymore. Don't you trust me?" I'd hesitated. The truth was, I hadn't let anyone in. Not since the grant rejection last fall, or the zoning board setbacks, or the endless nights I'd stayed up scribbling in my notebook, tweaking angles and airflow systems until my fingers cramped. My design was everything I had. It wasn't finished. Not yet. Still, she was my sister. We'd grown up in the same cramped house on the east side, slept in the same room until we were 15, fought over the same hand-me-downs, cried at the same funeral when Mom passed. It had always been the two of us. She was magnetic, always knew how to get into the right rooms, say the right things. I was quieter, the thinker, the builder, the one who stayed home while she chased the spotlight. So I let her in. She wandered the space like it was a gallery, ran her fingers along my drafting table, picked up a scale model I'd made by hand. "You're a genius," she said, not quite looking at me. "Why are you hiding this?" "I'm not hiding," I told her. "I'm just not finished." She nodded, then poured the wine. We drank, laughed, even watched a movie like Old Times. When she left, I didn't notice the missing folder. Not right away. It was an older version. An early draft of the final layout and proposal. Not the polished prototype I'd planned to submit eventually, but still mine. Still marked with my name, my research, my hand-drawn notes in the margins. I didn't realize she'd taken it until the day after the gala. That morning, my inbox was overflowing. Congratulations, stunned admiration, questions from industry insiders I hadn't spoken to in years, all praising a project I had never released. And every message was addressed to her. I didn't scream or confront her, not at first. I just sat on the edge of my bed, the morning light spilling in through the blinds like a spotlight on my humiliation, and stared at my laptop screen. She had renamed it, renamed my project, where I had titled the work The Root System because it mimicked how trees share resources underground. She had rebranded it Living Flow, sleeker, more commercial, but still mine. Even the diagrams in her portfolio presentation were from my old drafts. I recognized the little imperfections, the slight asymmetry in the east wall, the original version of the community atrium I'd since reworked. She hadn't even bothered to alter them, just took it, dressed it up in her voice, and smiled her way through interviews like she'd built it from the ground up. I opened my project archive, every timestamp, every sketch, every backup I'd ever made. I scrolled through thousands of files, from my first pencil drawing on a cafe napkin to a 3D rendering submitted to an urban housing conference 2 years ago. The proof was all there, but proof wasn't power. Eliza had already won the headlines. She had the endorsement from the Regional Green Foundation, a front-page feature in Archspace Weekly, and an invitation to speak at the Global Sustainability Summit in 3 months. She was being called the future of green architecture, and I was a footnote, a ghost. I knew what people would say if I spoke up now, that I was jealous, bitter, trying to tear her down, especially because she was my sister. That's the thing about betrayal when it comes wrapped in blood ties. No one wants to believe it. They just see a family feud, not a theft, a spat, not a scam. So I closed my laptop, and I began to plan. Not out of rage, though it simmered quietly beneath my skin, but out of clarity. I had spent 6 years building something real, something that mattered. I wasn't going to throw it all away in a fit of emotion. Eliza had taken the version I was going to let go of anyway. The draft, the rehearsal. She hadn't seen what I'd created in its full form. The final prototype. The evolution of every failure I'd learned from. I would finish it, I would launch it, and I would do it in a way that didn't just expose her. It would erase the illusion she'd worked so hard to build. 2 weeks later, I resurfaced. Not publicly, not yet, but quietly, precisely. I booked a consultation with a boutique IP law firm on Beacon Street. The kind that didn't advertise, didn't talk much, but handled the quiet wars no one saw coming. I laid out everything: sketches, blueprints, email threads, hard drives, time-stamped cloud backups. A decade of work in a single black leather portfolio. The attorney, an older woman named Donna, with steel gray hair and eyes like polished stone, flipped through my materials in silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was cool and certain. "You don't just have a case," she said. "You have leverage." That word rang in my ears long after I left her office. Leverage. I wasn't going to file a lawsuit, not yet. I didn't want a settlement, and I didn't want to be dragged into a public battle that would only make me look bitter and broken. I wanted to build, bigger, better, stronger, and I wanted them to come to me. I reopened my project, the real version, the finished one. The Root System 2.1. This time, I didn't work alone. I reached out to Dr. Ahmed, a structural engineer who had once called my airflow model a revolution in passive cooling. I called Luciana, a materials scientist who'd helped me source biodegradable composites during the early research phase. And I got in touch with Roland West, a quiet but brilliant project manager who'd left Eliza's team 6 months ago after creative differences. They all said the same thing in different ways. "We always knew it was your work. No fanfare, no spotlight. Just a clean workspace, a shared drive, and a late-night video call to map out timelines. And within a week, we were working like we'd never stopped." I posted a teaser on a niche design forum, a 10-second animation of a spiraling green tower blooming from a city block, paired with the caption, "Something new is growing." No name, no credits, just roots. Within 48 hours, the clip had over 80,000 views. My inbox filled again. Only this time, it wasn't congratulations for someone else. It was curiosity, excitement, and a few quiet questions from industry leaders. "Is this you?" I didn't answer. Not yet. Let Eliza enjoy her borrowed crown. Let the lights stay on her stage a little longer. I was planting something deeper. And when it bloomed, it would make her version look like a rough sketch on a cocktail napkin. The first time Eliza called me, I let it go to voicemail. She didn't mention the project. Not directly. Just a breezy, forced laugh, and the usual shallow warmth. "Hey, just wanted to check in. You've been quiet. We should get coffee soon." I didn't respond. The second time, it was a little different. "People are asking questions," she said, her voice clipped at the edges. "That teaser thing, it looks familiar?" Still didn't respond, because by then I didn't have to. 3 days after I posted the second clip, a time-lapse of a self-cooling modular housing unit unfolding from a single truck-sized crate, ArchSpace Weekly ran a speculative article titled, "Is the future of eco-housing already here?" The article didn't name me, but it featured a frame-by-frame comparison of Eliza's award-winning design and mine, side by side. One was polished and still. The other was alive, breathing, evolving in real time. People noticed. Comments turned. Fast. Wait, wasn't this concept floating around years ago from someone else? This version actually looks functional. Where's the real innovator behind this? I didn't say a word, but others did. Dr. Ahmed posted a short essay on LinkedIn praising visionary work finally getting the recognition it deserves. Luciana followed with a quote tweet of the animation, adding, "This is what happens when science, design, and authenticity align. No shortcuts." Eliza had always thrived in curated spaces. Panels, galas, photo ops. She was dazzling when everything was staged. But she didn't know how to move in a space that was watching, whispering, analyzing every frame. I watched her recent interview on a popular design podcast. Her smile too stiff, her answers looping like rehearsed PR scripts. She kept glancing off camera, like waiting for a cue that never came. The host asked about her inspirations. She stumbled. The idea came from, well, years of conversations with different voices, and collaboration is key. It was the first time I saw her uncertain. The first time she wasn't standing on my work like a pedestal, because the ground beneath her had started to shift. She'd stolen my foundation. But I had the blueprint, and I wasn't just building something new. I was building something that couldn't be stolen. Because this time, I wasn't letting it out of my hands. It started quietly. As these things often do. A sponsor withdrew from Eliza's keynote at the Global Sustainability Summit. No official statement, just a silent redaction from the website. Then a major architectural blog published a retrospective piece titled Design Echoes, the Hidden Hands Behind Innovation. They didn't accuse her outright. They didn't have to. They laid out the timeline, the drafts, the academic citations that traced my project years before she ever uttered a word about living flow. A digital forensic firm confirmed the metadata embedded in one of her now public blueprints matched a source file from an earlier laptop. Mine. She still hadn't contacted me directly. Not even when her panel was canceled. Not when the invitation to sit on the regional planning board was postponed indefinitely. Not even when Design Narrative published an op-ed that called her work a beautifully rendered imitation. But she knew, and now the people who once praised her were falling quiet. She released a statement, thin, glossy, corporate in tone. Collaborative efforts, overlapping inspirations, misunderstanding regarding intellectual contribution. She never said my name, and that was her last mistake. Because that same morning, the Boston Creative Alliance released its list of next 100 visionaries, and there it was. In bold serif font and black ink, Hartley, R. Ray Hartley. Not Eliza, not the sister who stood under chandeliers and spoke in soundbites, but the one who had spent 6 years in the shadow, quietly planting, refining, evolving. The write-up was short. Her architectural vision merges functionality with emotional resonance, design that breathes and remembers. After years of under-recognition, her voice is now impossible to ignore. I didn't forward the link. I didn't share it. I didn't tag her, but she saw it. The next day, my phone rang again, and this time, I picked up. There was a pause before she spoke, the first real silence I'd ever heard from Eliza. "Ray," she said finally, her voice cracked. "Can we talk?" I let the question sit. Let her sit in the same silence I had. In the back of that ballroom, in the inbox filled with her praise, in the years where my work lived without credit, without name. Then I said calmly, "We already are." We met in a quiet cafe on the South End, the kind of place Eliza wouldn't have been caught dead in 6 months ago. She looked different, less polished, hair tied back in a messy twist, sunglasses too big for her face, like she was hoping to disappear behind them. She took them off when I sat down. Her eyes were bloodshot. "I didn't think it would go this far," she said, barely above a whisper. I stirred my tea slowly. "How far did you think it would go, Eliza? An award? A few interviews? A TED Talk?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked down at her hands. You weren't doing anything with it. You said it wasn't finished. I thought, maybe if I gave it a stage, it would push you to… To what? I snapped, my voice sharper than I meant. To finally prove myself worthy of my own work? Her shoulders curled inward like she was trying to shrink. For a moment, I saw her as she once was. Not the headline darling or the fame chaser, but my sister. The girl who used to sneak out of the house with me to lie on the roof and name the stars. I messed up, she said finally. I know that now. I leaned back, studied her. You didn't just mess up. You erased me. You wore my name like a borrowed dress and smiled while people clapped for your reflection of me. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vengeance, just closure. I didn't come here to forgive you, I said calmly, and I didn't come to ruin you either. That part, you did all on your own. I'm sorry, she whispered. I nodded once. Good. Now say it publicly. Her eyes widened. You want me to tell the truth, I interrupted. On record, not some PR-flavored apology soaked in passive language. The truth she swallowed hard. If I do that, everything disappears. I'll lose everything. You already lost the only thing that mattered, I said, rising from my chair. Integrity. I left before she could respond. Outside, the city moved like always. Taxis honking, people on phones, steam curling from subway grates. But I felt still, steady, untouchable. I didn't need to destroy her. I just needed to take back what was mine. And I had. 3 months later, I stood in a different room. No chandeliers, no gala gowns, no applause waiting in advance. Just clean lines, natural light, and the soft hum of voices gathering in a space I designed. The ribbon-cutting ceremony for the pilot installation of the Root System 2.1. A modular, sustainable housing solution, born from years of quiet obsession, frustration, and perseverance. This time, there was no one standing in front of me. No sister between me and the spotlight. Just me, the team who built it with me, and the community that would soon call this space home. Dr. Ahmed gave the opening remarks. Luciana unveiled the structural model. Roland joked about the sleepless nights and caffeine overdoses. And when they called me up, Ray Hartley, lead architect and vision director, I didn't freeze. I spoke. I told the story, in pieces, not about betrayal or theft, but about resilience, about knowing your voice even when no one else hears it, about trusting that the truth, given time and care, will rise. The media didn't need drama anymore. The design had spoken. Eliza released her public statement a week after our cafe meeting. It was direct, honest. The words were hers, but they sounded like mine, maybe for the first time. She stepped back from the summit, returned her award, issued a formal retraction, naming me as the originator and architect of the work. There were no press tours, no stage tears, just the truth, and that was enough. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't need to, because by then, I was already somewhere else, not chasing recognition, not correcting lies, but building again. Root System 2.2 was already in prototype, a foundation spreading underground, reaching further. People sometimes ask me if I ever forgave her, or if I regret not suing, not burning her to the ground. But justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it waits, and sometimes it blooms quietly, in steel and light and green vines that wrap around a structure no one believed in but you. I don't need revenge. I have legacy, and she can't take that from me again.